Home Assistant is supplied with a number of software add-ons and integrations, which when you install them will give you access to additional services and smart devices. But there's a community of developers out there making additional software that Home Assistant doesn't know about out of the box. Now, you could manually search for and install these yourself, but there is an actual add-on known as HACS that can do all of this for you. Home Assistant Community Store does require manual installation and does require a GitHub account, but once you've got it installed, it will search these repositories for you. It will make it easier to install and maintain them. But how do you install HACS? Well, if that's something that you're interested in finding out, then stick around and watch this video, because that's what we'll be going over. Now, before we install any software, I do need to point out that you're going to need access to a GitHub account. And that's because HACS is going to be doing searching of GitHub amongst all the different repositories. And it would actually have problems if it did it anonymously. So we need to be able to give it access to an actual GitHub account to do these searches. And it will actually ask for access to a GitHub account during the installation and configuration process. Now, if you've already got an account, then yes, you could use that. But I think the better security strategy is to just set up a completely new one that's going to be only used by HACS itself. That way it doesn't have access to anything in your own repository, and all it's going to be doing is just doing its searching for all of these different software integrations and dashboard improvements that are out there on GitHub that you can use with Home Assistant. Now, in order to be able to create a GitHub account, you need to come to the GitHub website here, github.com. and then click on sign up. So it starts the actual process, and what it's now going to ask for here is my email address. Now, you can actually create multiple GitHub accounts. They just need their own email address, so that's something to bear in mind. And what I've actually done is to go to one of the free service providers out there and create a completely new email address that I can use in this video. Now, how you do that, it's really going to depend on your own country. For example, what I'm using, you may not have access to in your country, or it may not be practical. You might get better options out there. But once you've actually got that email address, we need to put that into that field there, and then click on continue. And now what it wants is an actual password. So I'm going to put in a long, complicated password, and this is going to be unique to GitHub. Now, next thing I need to do is click on continue, and then now it wants to know, well, what username do you actually want to use for this account? So I'm going to give it a username, and it's telling me that is available, so I'll click on continue. It's asking me if I want updates. In my particular case, no, I'm not really using GitHub as actually a software developer or anything, so I don't necessarily need to know this information. So I'm just going to put in N, but if you do want that information, put in Y. Click on continue. Now, it's running what's going to be basically a captcha. It wants to make sure that this is not an automated attempt to try to create an account. So I'm going to click on start puzzle. And then it wants to know whatever it happens to ask you. So you need to, basically solve the puzzle. And then once that puzzle's been solved, you then click on the button at the bottom here which says create account. No, I don't want to save this. And now what it's done is to send an actual code over to my email account. And now I've got to wait for that actual code to turn up, and then I'll be able to respond back to this. So I've now got the code in an email that's been received from GitHub. So I need to fill in the details here. So I've just pasted that in, and that's it. It's created the actual account for me. We just need to go through the personalization if you want to, but in this case, I'm just going to click on the option at the bottom which says skip personalization. because again, I'm not using this for software development or anything like that. So we'll just wait for this to finish off, and then we'll be able to start using this. So it's actually now completed, and the next thing to do, and what I would suggest, is to set up two-factor authentication. Up here in the top right hand corner, we're going to click on our portrait, and then we're going to select settings, and then over here where it says password and authentication, we're going to click that. Then we're going to click the option enable two-factor authentication. Now we do have a choice between using an app or using SMS, in other words text messaging. I really wouldn't use that, it's not really recommended. It's much better to use an app. Now which one you use, it's giving you some examples of different ones, but which one you use is entirely up to you. I'm going to click on continue, and now what it wants me to do is to basically open up the app, scan in that QR code, and then once I do that, the app will come back and give me an actual code to paste in here. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back. Now as soon as I actually typed in the code that I got from my app, it actually automatically accepted that and moved me on to this stage here where it's giving me the recovery codes. Now this is private information, you really don't want to be giving this out. This is a way for you to be able to recover your account if you lose access to the app, for instance. Something goes wrong with your phone for whatever reason. Once you've enabled two-factor authentication, the problem you're going to have is without that app you cannot get access to your account. So you need these recovery codes to be able to then get back in again. So what I'm going to do is click on the download option, and it's downloaded these actual recovery codes into a text file. I need to go and put them in a very safe and secure place. Putting them in like a password database manager is sometimes useful, I must admit. But once I've done that, I can then click on the option here to say, yes, I have saved my recovery codes. And now we've got two-factor authentication enabled. So I just need to click on done. And what it means is that going forward, every time I actually want to log in to this GitHub account, I have to be able to log in with my username and password, but I also need to use that app for two-factor authentication to be able to secure my authentication into GitHub. So unless somebody's got access to the app or those recovery codes, it's going to be difficult for them to be able to get into the account unless there's some security flaw within the authentication process. But this is a much more secure way of logging into services like GitHub. Now out of the box, Home Assistant knows nothing about HACS. You can go searching for it within the add-on store and you're not going to find it there. Now, what the developer's now done to make this a whole lot easier to install is to provide a complete script. Basically, we just need to point it at this actual script file. It'll download the necessary software and install it. So the whole process is much easier than it normally would be. So what we need to do is to get access to Home Assistant. So I've logged in using SSH. If you're not familiar with how to actually install the SSH add-on, for instance, and don't know how to connect in to Home Assistant using SSH, I do have another video that covers that. But once you're logged in as the root account, we'll paste in this command here, which is basically just pulling the script file down from the website, and then it's actually going to execute the script file. So I'll leave details of all this in the link, but I'm just going to hit return, and then off it goes and starts the installation process. Now that download and install actually went really quickly, but as it says at the bottom here, you need to restart Home Assistant. So what you need to do is I'll just minimize my screen here. If we go to Developer Tools, then we've got an option here to restart Home Assistant. So I'm going to click on Restart, click Restart again, and then off it'll go and restart Home Assistant. Now the next thing to do is to install the HACS integration. Now the actual website installation instructions tell you to do a hard refresh. I found that isn't always necessary, but for the sake of what the developer is telling us, we're going to do that. So I'm just going to hit Control F5 to make sure we refresh the browser cache. I need to log back into Home Assistant because of that. We then go to Settings, then to Devices and Services. And then by default, we end up on the Integrations tab. So we're going to click Add Integration. And then we're just going to filter this out. So there we can now see HACS. Now, what you might find is if you don't do that browser cache clear, this doesn't show up. That's why the actual developer is actually telling you to do a clear of the browser cache, because you might not actually see HACS in this integration list. So we're going to click that. Now it comes up with a series of pre-checks. So what you're going to have to do is basically select these before you can continue. So it's asking you, do you know how to access Home Assistant's logs? So for example, what you can do, I've got another page open here. If we go to Settings, and what I'm looking for is the actual logs here. So that's under System. Then we go to Logs. If I look at full logs, this is a complete list of logs. You can select this drop down menu here and you can start looking for the logs for individual add-ons and integrations that you've got, for example. So that's one way of looking for the logs. So we'll say that yes, we know how to do that. I know that there are no add-ons in HACS. Now that's true because all HACS actually does itself is it actually just goes out and searches these GitHub repositories for integration software. And then it gives you the option to actually download and install those. So HACS in itself isn't actually doing anything other than making it easier for you to actually install this software. It's also making sure you essentially signed a disclaimer, basically saying, yeah, I'm well aware this is custom software and it's untested. These are things you need to bear in mind, is that we're downloading software from community developers. The actual developers who actually provide us with Home Assistant have no idea about all these developers, what they're doing. They might make changes to the code for Home Assistant. And the problem is they might do something within their software that causes these integrations that we install to break. It's not really practical for them to go out and test everybody else's. So they only provide a limited number of add-ons and integrations. It's really left to you and these other developers in the community to keep up with all those sort of changes. So these are things you just need to be bear in mind. And it also says there, if you run into issues, then you just should disable your actual custom components as well. So we'll just click on Submit. Now, what it's basically telling us here is that it needs access to your GitHub account. And it's giving us a URL here. So we're going to click on that URL and it'll take us over to our GitHub account. And what it now wants us to do is to put this code in. So by doing that, we're actually giving the application access to our GitHub account. So it's using OAuth to basically simplify the whole process. You don't have to give it a username and a password. It just gives it its own authentication mechanism to be able to get access to our GitHub account. So what I can do is just paste that and then click on Continue. And it's now actually giving us details of where this connection is coming from, details about the application, what it's got access to. So what I'm going to do is say, yeah, that's fine. I'm basically allowing that. So I'm going to click Authorize HACS. And that's it. So if we go back to Home Assistant, it's now going through the rest of the process. So it's now finished. Like other installations, it wants to know, do you want to put this in a particular location, because it's adding HACS as an integration into Home Assistant. For me, it's not going to be in a natural area as such, so I'm just going to leave that blank, but it's up to you. And then I'm going to click on Finish. Now, what that then does is it's completed the actual installation of the integration of HACS itself, and it's given us a shortcut to it over here on the left-hand side. Now, in order to use HACS, what you'll need to do is click on the option over here on the left-hand side where it says HACS. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will probably notice there's actually an icon there now. After I finished the installation, that was blank, there was nothing there. So all I've done is just refresh the browser and the icons appeared. But we'll click on that and it gives us options of integrations and front end basically. there is a link for add-ons, which, as the pre-check list mentioned, Home Assistant, or rather HACS rather, doesn't give you access to add-ons to download and install, just integrations and front ends. Home Assistant itself allows you to install add-ons and integrations, but not HACS. So all this is going to do is it's just going to basically take you to the same page as if you go through the settings menu. And then the about page just takes you to information about HACS itself. So it tells you the version, details, and so on. What we're interested in really is the choices of integrations and front end. So we'll start with integrations. So we'll click on that. I don't have anything installed because we've just installed HACS itself. So if I click on explore and download repositories, it's similar to what Home Assistant itself does. You get a big long list of integrations that it knows about. And incidentally, if you leave it a while and it finds something new, next time you come back here, you'll have a list of new repositories that it's found, and it'll give you an option to just dismiss those because they're just to let you know that I've found something new. But in any case, if you want to install something, you click on the option here. Then you can either scroll through the list or you can filter them out. Now Alarmo is a pretty popular integration that's out there, so we're going to click on that. And what it does, it takes us to the same GitHub page as if you'd gone and found this yourself manually. Now, there are installation instructions on here, but what we can do is just click on the download button here. And it gives us a choice where maybe there's some new feature being made available in beta. So if you're interested in beta software, you can enable that. There's also an option to select either the existing latest version, although there's some older versions we're getting choices of as well. Typically for most people, you would just leave these as they are and just click on download. Although it does tell you where it's actually going to be installing this software as well. So what we're going to do to install this is just click on download, and then off it goes and pulls that software down from the actual repository. Now at this stage it doesn't look as though anything's actually happened, but if we click on the arrow here to go back, you'll see it's actually saying it's pending a restart, so it needs Home Assistant itself restarting. So we'll click on Developer Tools, click on Restart, and then we'll click on Restart again. Well, now that Home Assistant has restarted, if I go back to HACS and then to integrations, you can see we've now got our Alarmo software installed. Now, all Home Assistant has actually done is to install the actual software that allows you to install the integration. So there is still more work to do to actually take advantage of Alarmo here. So that's something to bear in mind. It's not a complete, installation process. All it's done is effectively is saved you having to go out and find this software on a GitHub repository out there somewhere and find out how to install it into Home Assistant. It's done that part for you. It's still up to you to install the actual integration. So if I go to Settings, then to Devices and Services, we're on the Integrations tab by default. But if I click on Add Integration, and if I then start to type in Alarmo, you can see I've now got an option to install the Alarmo integration. So it does make that software installation process easier, but just to point out, it doesn't do the whole thing. You've still got to install that integration. Now, if you no longer want that actual software, what you can do is you can go back to HACS. I mean, you'll have to uninstall the integration first, but go back to HACS, go to integrations, and then in this case we click on Alarmo. Up here in the top right hand corner we've got a menu option. If I click on that, what I can do is, maybe the software is causing me just too many problems, or I just don't need it. I do have a choice here where I can remove it, and what HACS will do is then remove the actual software from the actual system. So we'll click on that, I'll click remove again, and that takes the software off. So essentially it's just deleting it from the actual custom folder and any integration that it's got within the system. But if we go back to Settings, Devices and Services, I'm not seeing any options for Alarmo now, and that's because the software has been removed. One thing to bear in mind is once you've actually installed an integration, if you're having some sort of problems, maybe it's causing problems for Home Assistant, for example, like those pre-checks were warning us, you need to know how to actually disable integrations. To do that, you come to this integrations tab, you pick the actual integration, click on its menu options, and there's usually an option which says disable, and it just disables that specific integration. So that's good to know with custom software, because one of the problems you might run into is maybe the software developer is giving you this actual software, you've installed it, and then somewhere later down the line, Home Assistant gets an update and it breaks the integration, which has a bit of a ripple effect and a knock-on effect, causing Home Assistant to have problems, for example. Or maybe the integration is just not working. The easiest thing to do is just disable the actual integration rather than doing a complete uninstall, for example, and wait for the actual developer to update their own software to fix it. I mean, the good thing is that HACS itself, it does let you know when there's updates come out for your integrations. Usually when it's found some updates, it actually tells you on here that there's new updates available for certain integrations, and it actually allows you to then download and update your actual integrations you've already got installed. So it's not only good for installing this custom software that's out there, but also being able to maintain it as well. Now, another useful thing that we can get access to in HACS is front ends. So here on the HACS page, we've got this option here for front end. So we'll click on that. We'll click on explore and download repositories. So same as before, we're getting access to a big long list of things that it knows about. One popular one, for example, is auto entities. So if I click on that one, as before, you're getting a sort of access to the GitHub page for it, but I can just click on download. Again, we've got choices of beta versions or older versions, but normally we'll just go with the defaults. Now, it does give you some additional information that you need to configure. So these are things you need to bear in mind. You'll have to follow along with whatever this is telling you. But either way, make a note of that. Click on download. And off it goes, and it downloads the actual front end similar as to before. Now, this time around, it's actually saying you need to reload the actual web browser. So we're going to click on reload. I'm going to have to log back in again. And basically what that would allow me to do is to start customizing my dashboard using this auto entities card that you can set up. The only thing to bear in mind is you don't see it until you make that additional change. So if I go to say dashboard, if I create a new dashboard, just call this one test, for instance, click on create, open that one, I'll edit that. I'm going to start with a completely new empty dashboard, click on take control. Now you can then start adding cards, for example. Now if I scroll down here, the problem is that custom front end that we installed doesn't show up, and that's because we have to actually make those configuration changes as well. But that's basically what the front ends are for, to be able to customize the dashboard. Well, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I really do hope you found it useful. If so, then do click the like button and share, as that'll help get the video out to more people who might find it useful as well. If you've got any comments or suggestions, please post those in the comments section below. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more content like this, then yes, do subscribe. Just remember to set the bell icon to actually send you notifications when new content gets released. Although I also post to Twitter as well as Facebook. If you'd like to help the channel and support it, you can actually make contributions through PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. I've also got links to Patreon, and there's also the join membership option for YouTube itself. Patreon and YouTube members do have the option to actually benefit from early access as well. But above all, many thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.